After returning from my trip, I found my luggage on the sidewalk along with a note. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Sincerely, your loving daughter-in-law. Before the taxi pulled away, I had already called the bank. I'm the one paying the mortgage. Check it. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story and leave a comment with the city you're reading from so I'll know how far my story has traveled. I stared at the 4 neatly lined suitcases on the sidewalk, unable to believe my eyes. After a week visiting my sister in Colorado, all I wanted was to sink into my old armchair with a hot cup of tea. Instead, I was locked out of my own house. Rain clouds gathered overhead as I pulled the note from under the handle of the largest suitcase. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, hurried slants. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your loving daughter-in-law. My hands trembled as I reread the line. I had lived in this house for 35 years. Robert and I built it when David was little. We planted every tree in the yard. We chose every piece of furniture, painted every wall. Then Robert died 2 years ago. I agreed to transfer the deed to David and Sarah, at least on paper. But I was still the one secretly paying the mortgage. Fumbling, I pulled out my phone and called the bank before the taxi left. I needed confirmation of what I already knew. Yes, Mrs. Miller, we show your automatic payment of $1,866 was processed on schedule last Friday, the clerk confirmed. Thank you, I whispered and closed the phone. A heavy raindrop struck my forehead as I stood there at 67 years old, staring at my belongings on the sidewalk. The sky split open, giving me permission to collapse too. I should have seen it earlier. The secret glances between David and Sarah. Every time I mentioned fixing up the kitchen, there were clumsy hints about retirement communities where I wouldn't need to worry about gardening anymore. The way they rearranged the living room. Last Christmas, while I was visiting my sister, they moved my reading chair down to the basement. Little things, though they weren't so little. The garage door was unlocked. A double bed had been shoved against the wall, a small table with a lamp beside it. My clothes hung on a rolling rack. My books, photos, and keepsakes were packed into cardboard boxes labeled Mom's Stuff in Sarah's handwriting. I sank onto the bed, the cold concrete beneath my feet. Through the small window, I could see the house where I had raised my son, said goodbye to my husband, and now seemed to have lost my place. My phone buzzed with a message from David. Mom, we need space. Sarah needs a home office. The garage apartment is plenty for you to use for now. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. As if I were the problem. I had never been one to cry easily, but hot tears silently rolled down my cheeks. I remembered sleepless nights holding David through his asthma attacks. The second job I worked to pay his college tuition when Robert's business was failing. The weekends I babysat so David and Sarah could have their time alone. And now I was reduced to an inconvenience shoved into a garage. I didn't answer his text. Instead, I called Martha, my lifelong friend. Linda, what happened? She asked, hearing the desperation in my voice. I need a place to stay, I managed, the words stuck in my throat like shards of glass. They locked me in the garage. Martha didn't ask another question. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. Sitting on the thin mattress, surrounded by the last remnants of my life packed into boxes, I made a decision. This house had been my heart for 35 years. I had poured my love, money, and dreams into it, and now they thought they could erase me so easily. The garage door rattled as rain pounded outside. I looked at my trembling hands, slowly curling into fists. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just David's mother or Robert's widow. I was Linda Miller, and I would no longer be invisible. Martha's living room wasn't large, but at least it had a lock and windows that welcomed the sunlight. After 3 nights at Sunset Inn, the name bitterly fitting for this chapter of my life, I was grateful to have a place rent-free. "You can stay as long as you need, sweetheart," Martha said, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. "Tom and I rattle around this house like 2 peas in a pod since the kids moved out." I gripped the cup tightly. "I'm grateful, but I can't stay forever. I need to sort out the house." "You mean your house?" Martha arched an eyebrow. "The one you're still paying for?" Martha had been my friend for more than 30 years. She knew Robert. She watched David grow up. She had been there through joy and through sorrow, and unlike my son, she remembered who I was before I was made invisible. I kept turning over in my mind when it all began to change. I stared into my coffee. After Robert died, I thought signing the house over to David and Sarah would help them. They had just had little Emily. Money was tight, and they took advantage, Martha said for me. Memories came back like bruises I had tried not to touch. 6 months after the funeral, Sarah began rearranging the house, saying it needed updating. Every suggestion I made was dismissed. My things were pushed into closets, then into the basement, then into storage. Do you know what Sarah said when I protested about throwing out Robert's fishing gear? "We need to move on. This isn't a museum." As if my husband's memory was nothing more than clutter to be cleared. Martha squeezed my hand. "And David? Surely he defended you?" I let out a bitter laugh. Even I could hear the ache in it. David said I was difficult, that I needed to adjust to the new normal. His new normal meant forgetting his father and shoving his mother aside. Control crept in so slowly I didn't see it. First it was the kitchen they criticized my cooking. Then my TV shows were too loud. My friends visited too often. My garden took up space they wanted. Every time I gave in, they pushed further. Worst of all, I let it happen. I kept paying the mortgage, afraid they would struggle. I wanted to help, to be needed, to be loved. "You've been buying your place in that house, in your son's life," Martha said quietly. The truth in her words cut deep. One payment at a time. One mortgage check at a time. My phone buzzed again. A message from David. "Mom, when will you pick up your things? We need to turn the garage into Emily's playroom." I handed the phone to Martha, my hands trembling. "Ungrateful," she muttered. Then her face tightened. "Linda, there's something you need to know. I wasn't going to say anything, but you deserve the truth." My chest constricted. "What is it?" "Last month at book club, Sarah was there. She had a few drinks and slipped. They're planning to sell the house to buy into a new development in Hollywood Hills. The rooms seem to tilt. They're planning to sell my house. They think it's theirs," Martha said softly. "And legally it is, but morally it's not." I thought of the 35 years etched into those walls. Robert and I carrying David through the door. Birthdays, Christmases, the garden Robert built for our 20th anniversary. My husband's final breaths in the bedroom, filled with the memories we created. And now they would sell it all to strangers without a second thought. "What am I supposed to do?" I whispered. Martha's eyes hardened. "First, you stop paying the mortgage. Let's see how they manage when the bank starts calling. But what about my credit score?" "Second," she pressed on, "you talk to Brian, my nephew. He's an pad of my attorney who specializes in elder rights. He'll know what to do." "I'm not elderly," I protested weakly. Martha raised an eyebrow. "You're old enough to deserve respect. And clearly, you're not getting it." She was right. For 2 years I had shrunk, stayed quiet so I wouldn't be a burden. And where had that left me? Thrown out of my house, my belongings shoved into boxes, my existence reduced to an inconvenience. When that truth settled in, something else stirred beneath the hurt. A low, simmering anger, unfamiliar after so many years of submission. "All right," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's meet Brian." Martha squeezed my hand. "That's right. And Linda, remember who you are. You're not just David's mother or Robert's widow. You're Linda Miller." And it's time everyone remembered that. For the first time since I had seen my luggage sitting on the sidewalk, I felt a flicker of hope. Or maybe it was resolve. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to give up. Brian, Martha's nephew, wasn't what I expected. In jeans and a casual shirt, he looked more like a college professor than a lawyer. But his eyes were sharp. He scanned the mortgage papers I brought. "So you've been paying for a house that's no longer in your name," he frowned. "Your son and daughter-in-law live there for free and now plan to sell it? Honestly, that's terrible, even to me." "That's right. And they locked you in the garage?" I nodded, heat rushing to my face in shame. How had I let it come to this? "You still have options," Brian said. "Financial arrangements like this can be treated as an implied contract. At the very least, you can sue to recover the mortgage payments you've made since signing the deed." Martha finally spoke, breaking her silence. "But first, you need to confront them, make them understand what they've done." Brian looked doubtful, but I knew Martha was right. Before taking legal action against my own son, I had to give him one last chance to make things right. That's why I stood on the front porch the next day, heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. I had lived in this house before David was even born, and now I was a guest, needing permission to step inside. Sarah quickly covered her surprise with a stiff smile. "Oh, I didn't expect you." "I need to talk to you and David," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course. Come in." The living room looked different than when I'd left. My reading lamp was gone, replaced with a sleek, modern floor lamp. The family photos I once arranged on the mantel had been shifted, and some of Robert's pictures had disappeared. David came out of the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk about the house," I said. "Martha told me you planned to sell it." The glance they exchanged confirmed everything. "We were going to tell you." David avoided my eyes. "When everything was finalized." "Finalized," I repeated. "This has been my home for 35 years. Your father and I built it. We raised you here." Sarah sighed theatrically. "Oh, Linda, we understand you're sentimental, but right now we have to do what's best for our family." "Your family?" I echoed. "Then what am I?" An uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Mom," David said at last, lowering his voice, "you signed the house over to us. We're grateful for everything you've done, but now it's our property. We'll decide what happens to it." I drew a deep breath. "I've been paying the mortgage for the past 2 years, $1,866 each month from my account, keeping this roof over your heads." Another look passed between them. "That was your choice," Sarah said coldly. "We never asked you to do that." My hands began to shake. "I did it to help, because that's what family does and we are grateful," David said, though his tone didn't match his words. "But it doesn't change the legal reality. This house belongs to us. So 35 years of living here, of financial support, of my role in this family, all of that means nothing?" David shrugged, irritated but unmoved. "You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. We can help you find a nice senior apartment," Sarah offered sweetly. "I don't need a nice senior apartment," I snapped. "I need my son to show me some respect." Sarah stepped forward, her smile sugar-coated. "Oh, I think you're just emotional. Maybe we should talk another time." And in that moment, I knew. I truly knew there was no way to repair things. The son I had raised, the boy I had loved with all my heart, was gone. In his place stood a stranger who saw me only as a burden. "I've stopped the automatic mortgage payments," I said softly. David's face changed instantly. "What?" "If you want to sell my house, you'll have to pay for it yourselves." "We can't do that," Sarah cut in, her voice sharp. "What about our credit score?" "We have plans." "Yes," I said. "I've heard it's beautiful there this time of year." David's expression darkened. "Mom, this house was a gift from Dad to me. You know that. It was never really yours." Those words landed like a direct blow. Never really yours. 35 years of my life, reduced to 5 words. "I understand," I answered, my voice barely audible. "All right then. I guess there's nothing more to say." My legs trembled as I walked to the door. I stopped, looking at my son, who no longer looked back at me. "Your father would be ashamed of you, David. And for the first time, so am I." I stepped outside and closed the door gently. The cool spring breeze brushed against my burning cheeks as I walked down the path, leaving behind the house that had never truly been mine. Something inside me shattered that day, but something else stronger took its place. "What did you do?" Martha asked, her coffee cup pausing at her lips. "I stopped paying," I repeated, still surprised by my own boldness. "I told them if they want to sell the house, they'll have to pay for it themselves." Martha set her cup down firmly. "Good for you." Brian, who had insisted on accompanying me after the confrontation, looked less enthusiastic. "This is a good first step, but we need to protect you legally. If your name is no longer on the deed, you could end up liable for the debt without any claim to the property." The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to fade, replaced by creeping doubt. Had I made a terrible mistake? "No," Martha said firmly. "You finally stood up for yourself." Brian tapped his pen against his notebook. "Let's be strategic. I'll contact the bank tomorrow, explain the situation, and see what options exist. In the meantime, you need to gather every bit of proof showing you've made these payments." I nodded, thinking of the meticulous financial records Robert had taught me to keep. At least I still had those. "What about my belongings? The house?" I asked. Martha straightened. "I'll go with you to collect them if they give you any trouble." I still remembered the way I swung a baseball bat back in Little League. "Even so," I laughed. Martha had always been fiercely protective, even back in high school, when she stood up to girls who mocked my old clothes. "I don't know what I'd do without you two," I said, my voice shaking. Brian reached across and clasped my hand. "You're not alone, Mrs. Miller. We'll make sure they can't take advantage of you again." The next morning, I got a call from Force Federal Bank. I answered nervously, bracing for questions about the overdue mortgage. "Mrs. Miller, this is Trevor Phillips." "From the mortgage department," the voice said. "We received a request to review your situation regarding the property on Maple Avenue." I gripped the phone tightly. "Yes, that's right. I understand you've been making payments on a property that isn't in your name. Our records show consistent payments for 2 years. "That's correct," I confirmed. "But I've decided to stop." There was a pause. "Mrs. Miller, I don't normally do this, but would you be willing to come into the branch to talk? There may be options you haven't considered." There's more, I thought. 2 hours later, I sat across from Trevor, a kind man about my son's age, as he explained something called an equitable mortgage. Essentially, by making ongoing mortgage payments on a property without benefiting from it, I could establish an equitable claim even if my name wasn't on the deed. A spark of hope rose in my chest. What does that mean? It means you can place a lien on the property for the amount you've contributed. They can't sell it without resolving that lien. For the first time since seeing my luggage dumped on the sidewalk, I felt a measure of control return. There's one more thing. Trevor lowered his voice. Your son called this morning, furious about the missed payment. He doesn't seem to understand how a mortgage actually works. I wasn't surprised. David had always relied on others to handle life's practical matters. First Robert and me, now Sarah, and clearly my monthly payments. What did you tell him? I asked. That a late payment would affect his credit score and could lead to foreclosure, Trevor said. He wasn't happy. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage as soon as possible. I handed the message to Trevor. What do you want to do, Mrs. Miller? He asked. Such a simple question, yet no one had asked me in so long. What did I want? Not just about the house, but about my life. I thought about the confrontation with David and Sarah, the way they dismissed my contributions, the assumption that I would keep funding their dreams while being shoved into a garage. I wanted what was legally mine. I want what belongs to me, I said, surprised at the firmness in my voice. Trevor nodded, respect clear on his face. Then let's make that happen. That afternoon, armed with Trevor's information and Brian's legal advice, I took an unexpected step into my new life. I applied for a job. The Help Wanted sign in the window of Rose Cafe had caught my eye as I returned to Martha's house. You want to be a waitress? Martha asked when I told her. I laughed. I worked as a waitress all through college, I reminded her, and I need my own income, my own life. I can't hide forever in your living room. Martha nodded. Rosie has the best pies in town. 2 days later, I had my first shift. By the end, my feet ached and my back throbbed, but the tips in my pocket were mine, earned with my own hands. That simple satisfaction was something I hadn't felt in years. When I returned to Martha's, exhausted yet strangely energized, I saw 6 missed calls from David. I listened to the first voicemail. Mom, the bank called about the mortgage. They mentioned a lien. What are you doing? Call me back right now. I deleted the message without listening further. This time David would have to wait until it was convenient for me, not the other way around. Martha handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the porch swing. How does it feel? She asked gently. I thought for a moment, watching the sky painted pink and gold by the sunset. Like I finally woke up, I said. Like I've been sleepwalking since Robert died. And now? Now I'm someone else. And myself again. A new Linda? Martha finished for me. I nodded, raising my glass in a toast. Linda, Miller. How good it felt to finally meet myself again. After 3 weeks working at Rose Cafe, I had settled into a surprisingly steady rhythm. The tips were modest but reliable. The physical work kept me busy. Most importantly, I had a purpose again, a place to go, people who counted on me, a life that was fully mine. So when I saw David standing awkwardly at the counter, I was startled. Mom, his voice softer than I had heard in years. Can we talk? Rosie, the cafe owner, looked at me from behind the counter. Take 15 if you need. I nodded and led David to a booth in the corner, away from the regulars who had become something like friends. You look different, he said, eyes on my apron. You've changed, David fidgeted in his seat. Mom, about the house. I won't discuss it here, I cut in. Yes, that's why I came, but you're wasting your time. Please, his voice cracked. Sarah and I are in trouble. The bank called. Our credit score is dropping because of the missed payments. I studied my son. The expensive watch, the carefully groomed hair, the faint scent of designer cologne. Everything on him cost more than I made in a day, a life shielded by the sacrifices of others. What do you want from me, David? He leaned forward. We need you to bail us out. Keep making the payments until we can sell the house. The audacity nearly made me laugh. And what do I get? We'll take care of you, he said, as though doing me a favor. There's a wonderful retirement community in Westbrook. Stop, I raised my hand. I don't need anyone to take care of me. I've been taking care of myself and you for years. Be reasonable. You can't keep working here forever. He gestured around the cafe with disdain. You're almost 70. 67, I corrected. And I'm fine. David's face tightened, the mask of regret slipping. All right, what do you want? I studied the stranger wearing my son's face. I want my house back. He blinked, then gave a nervous laugh. Impossible. We've already put money down on the Hollywood Hills place. That's not my problem. David's expression hardened. It is if you want a relationship with Emma, with us. The threat hung between us, ugly and raw. My own son using my love for my granddaughter as leverage. You're threatening to keep me from Emma? He had the decency to look embarrassed, but pressed on. I'm just saying families support each other. Sarah and I have a plan. You're in the way. Pain pierced me. In the way when I paid your college tuition, when I watched Emma every weekend so you and Sarah could have time together, or when I signed over the house and kept paying so you two could save up for the boat you bought last summer. David flushed red. That's not fair. No, it's not, I answered. Now I have to get back to work. I slid out of the booth, tying my apron again. Mom, please, his voice cracked. We need the Hollywood Hills house. We can't lose it. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who once climbed into my lap with skinned knees, waiting for me to make it better. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a man who saw me only as a means to an end. I'll think about it, I said. But first I need paperwork from you and Sarah. Meet me at Brian Wallace's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. David exhaled, relief flooding his face. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this. As he walked away, I wondered if I already did. The next day, I arrived early at Brian's office. My stomach twisted in knots. David and Sarah showed up right on time, dressed like they were heading to a business meeting. Sarah's smile was tight but triumphant as they sat down across from Brian's desk. Thank you for coming, Brian began formally. Mrs. Miller has considered your request regarding the property on Maple Avenue. We're very grateful, Sarah interjected smoothly. We're sure we can reach an arrangement that benefits everyone. Brian slid a document across the table. This is Mrs. Miller's proposal. David picked it up, his expression shifting from hope to confusion to anger in seconds. What is this? It's my condition for lifting the lien, I said calmly. I'll continue the payments, but the house must be sold back to me, not to strangers. Sarah snatched the paper from his hand. Ridiculous. You want us to sell the house to you for the remaining mortgage balance? It's worth at least 3 times that. It's worth exactly what I've put into it, I replied. 35 years of payments, repairs, and improvements. David's face turned scarlet. You can't do this. The house is legally ours. Brian leaned forward. This lien makes any sale extremely complicated. We'll fight it, Sarah said coldly. We'll hire our own lawyer. I nodded. Go ahead. But the legal process will drag on for months, maybe years. Your credit scores will keep dropping, and the Hollywood Hills house will be bought by someone else. The truth landed hard. David and Sarah had overextended, banking everything on a quick sale of my house. "Have you been planning this all along?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since you moved into the garage?" "No," I said quietly. "Only recently did I stop letting you take advantage of me." Sarah shot to her feet. "We need to talk privately." As they walked out, Brian gave me a nod of approval. "You're doing the right thing." I wasn't so sure. The look of betrayal in David's eyes haunted me. I had become as cold and calculating as they were. The door opened again. David and Sarah came back, faces tense but resigned. "We accept," David said stiffly, "but I hope you understand this will affect our relationship." I looked him straight in the eye. "I understand. And I hope one day you'll understand what it meant to throw your mother's luggage onto the sidewalk." That first night back in the house, I couldn't sleep. I walked through every room, touching the familiar walls, staring at the doorway where I had marked David's height year after year. I stood in the kitchen where Robert and I had danced on our 30th anniversary. 3 months had passed since that confrontation in Brian's office. 3 months of paperwork, tense exchanges as David and Sarah reluctantly moved out, and me slowly piecing my life back together. The house was both familiar and strange. Sarah had painted some rooms, a sterile gray-white, erasing the warm yellows and greens Robert and I had chosen. The kitchen was outfitted with sleek, soulless appliances, but beneath the surface, the core remained. The third stair still creaked. Afternoon sunlight still streamed through the arched window. The upstairs floor still slanted slightly, something Robert had never quite managed to fix. I stood in the master bedroom, now empty except for the bed I'd brought from Martha's living room. This had once been the place Robert and I shared our lives, where he took his final breath. The space felt sacred. "I'm home," I whispered, as though he could hear. The silence that answered was not loneliness but peace. The next morning, as I was unpacking dishes, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Martha standing there, holding a pot of soup and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming," she announced, striding straight into the kitchen. "Though really, it's a coming-home party." I laughed with her. Both are true. Martha set everything on the counter, her eyes sweeping the kitchen. "Oh my God, what did Sarah do to your beautiful oak cabinets?" "Painted them gray and replaced the handles with something called brushed nickel," I said. "So now oak is considered my femme." "Outdated?" Martha scoffed. "You know what's really outdated? Throwing your mother-in-law out on the street." We both laughed, though the hurt still lingered. "Any word from them?" Martha asked as she helped me unpack. I shook my head. Since the signing, David had clearly chosen the house over me. "That's not it," Martha countered. "You chose dignity." "That's different." I wasn't sure David would ever understand, but I had accepted my decision. The alternative? To keep letting them use me, treat me like something disposable. That was no longer acceptable. "Good," Martha said, opening the wine. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and gratitude swelled inside me for the woman who had stood by me when my own family had not. In the weeks that followed, life began to take on rhythm. Mornings at Rose Cafe, afternoons spent restoring the house into something that felt like mine again. I didn't have the money to replace all the sterile modern pieces Sarah had left, but I could add warmth. Colorful pillows, family photos back on the mantel, Robert's fishing rods hanging in the office. One Saturday morning, as I was planting tulips in the front yard, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. My chest tightened as David stepped out, looking awkward. He stood clumsily at the edge of the garden. "Nice flowers." I nodded, my voice caught. "Your father always loved tulips," I said. He looked around the yard. "I remember him planting them every fall." I brushed dirt from my hands. "What brings you here, David?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We couldn't buy the Hollywood Hills house." I wasn't surprised. Their credit had surely taken a serious hit from all the late mortgage payments. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. David looked down at his expensive loafers, now dusted with garden soil. "We found a condo instead. Smaller, but maybe it'll teach us perspective." I waited, knowing there was more. "Sarah's pregnant again," he finally said. "Twins, due in January." "Congratulations," I answered softly, wondering if he meant the news to sting, to remind me of what I would miss. For the first time, David looked directly into my eyes. "Emma's been asking about you. She doesn't understand why we don't visit anymore." A sweet ache pierced my heart. I missed my granddaughter terribly. "Emma is always welcome here," I said, "and so are you." David nodded, then hesitated. "Mom, I've thought about everything. Not saying we handled it right, but you chose the house over family. I don't know if I can forgive that." The flicker of hope that had risen quickly dimmed. He still didn't understand. "I didn't choose the house, David," I said quietly. "I chose not to be erased. There's a difference." He frowned, clearly unconvinced. "Anyway, I thought you should know about the kids, and maybe Emma can come visit you, sometimes, if it works out." It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was a small crack in the wall between us. "I'd like that," I said as David walked away. I sat back on the porch swing, reflecting on the encounter. The relationship with my son was broken, maybe beyond repair. He still didn't see how deeply he had hurt me, how he had betrayed my trust, but at least he had come. He had extended a hand, though not enough. It was a beginning, not an end. That evening, Martha and her husband Tom came over, along with Rosie from the cafe and Brian with his wife. We sat in the backyard, the same place where David's graduation party had been held, where Robert and I celebrated anniversaries, where life had once bustled with its highs and lows. As the sun set, conversation flowed easily among those who had become the family I chose. A wave of peace washed over me. "A toast," Martha lifted her glass. "To Linda Miller, who reminds us it's never too late to reclaim your own life." Everyone raised their glasses, smiling warmly at me. Later, as the summer sky filled with stars, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. I thought of Robert, of the life we had built, of the son who had lost his way. I thought of the woman I had become in these past months, stronger, more decisive, no longer willing to shrink for someone else's convenience. The house was not just four walls and a roof. It was proof of existence, of resilience, of the quiet but unstoppable power of a woman who had finally learned to put herself first. I had come home not just to this house, but to my life. For the first time in years, the future stretched open, filled with possibilities that belonged to me alone. I am Linda Miller, and if you're reading these words, I hope you pause for a moment. Not to pity me, but to look at your own life, where maybe you, too, have been pushed into a quiet corner, unseen and unacknowledged. My story isn't just about an older woman abandoned by her children or a home nearly stolen. It's a story of awakening, of reclaiming a rightful place in a life that once seemed to have silenced you. I had endured. I had stayed quiet to keep the peace. I had feared that speaking up would shatter the family. But when I saw my luggage dumped on the sidewalk with a note saying the garage was where I could stay, I knew if I didn't rise, I would disappear completely. Not physically, but vanish from the woman I had once been. And so I chose not to be invisible anymore. I am not only David's mother, not only Robert's widow, not just the housekeeper, the cook, the babysitter. I am Linda. I have a name, a life, a heart that can love and hurt, and I deserve a place in the world I helped to build. If you've ever seen yourself in me, if you've ever walked away or stayed silent when disrespected, I hope you understand one thing. Sacrifice is noble, but it is never a license for others to trample you. Love cannot survive if it rests only on one-sided submission, and family, without respect, is nothing more than blood ties, not a home. I tell this story not to be called strong or resilient, but to remind you, you can do the same. No matter who you are, how old, what gender, whether you live in a small apartment or a grand estate, you have the right to say, I deserve more than this. No one has the right to lock you in the garage of life, hidden and silent, just because you love too much. And I want to ask you, if it were you, coming home to find your luggage on the sidewalk, what would you do? Have you ever had your rightful role taken from you? Have you ever been pushed aside in the name of family? If you want to tell your story, I will listen. I will help you turn it into a story, so it won't just be silent pain but a voice carried far and wide. Tell me, where are you reading this from? New York, Miami, Chicago, or a small mountain town? Because I don't want my journey to end on Maple Avenue. I want this story to reach those who have once bowed their heads. Have you ever given up? Ever thought you had nothing left worth keeping? I am Linda Miller. I was pushed to the edge, and I found my way back to the center of my life. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I understood. If I didn't reclaim my self-respect, I would have nothing left to pass on to my granddaughter except a lesson in silence. If you are ready, I will help write the first chapter of your new story. And if not, keep these words until the day you look in the mirror and ask yourself, when will I finally live as myself? Remember, I stood up, and you can too. And please share your story, because I believe from those stories we will all learn how to be stronger. And if you want to walk with me on the journeys ahead, stay so you won't miss the stories that might touch your heart, just as they have touched mine today.